Welcome to Illuminati Silver. We tell you the truth about silver. Today is Saturday the 15th of May 2021, and tomorrow, on Sunday, we shall be publishing our weekly update. Apologies for it being a day late. However, today's video, which is repeated to some extent on the Richard and Greg channel, link shown below, is about cybersecurity. And we're asking the question, are your devices, they are computers and phones and various other electronic devices, spying on you? And we have an interesting interview with an IT expert. So please listen in. Okay, this is an interview conducted this morning with a gentleman called Ray, that's his real name, but we can't, for certain reasons, give his surname, who has worked for the security agencies and has some very interesting information to impart. Now, we admit it's not about gold and silver or precious metals, but we thought the information that he is giving us is well worth a listen. So here goes. Ray, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Richard.
Now, for the benefit of our listeners, give us a sort of brief introduction to your experience in the internet security field, and then perhaps we'll ask a few questions about how safe the internet really is and the devices that we have in our home. So let's kick off with a little sort of smattering of your experience.
Okay, well, in the early 90s, I was working with the MOD, Ministry of Defence, and I then got involved with working with their contractors, setting them up for the relevant degrees of security they have to comply with, ensuring they were safe is the best way of putting it. I've done that ever since, on and off. I've worked moved away from high-level security to smaller businesses who are just as vulnerable, and occasionally individuals who feel they have the need to look after themselves, if you like, online.
So that's about 30 years experience in a field where perhaps certainly in the early days the internet was little known or little used, obviously, at that stage.
Yes, and very, very, even today, the internet is very misunderstood. People are not really aware of the consequences and the risks they take online.
Well, would you like to give us some examples? Because that sounds an interesting avenue to go down.
Well, I think irrespective of the weaknesses of the internet, a lot of people fail to remember that everything they've ever put online, be it on Facebook or any social media or any website or any comment, any photograph they've ever uploaded, stays there. It never goes away. The internet doesn't forget. It's always there. So you imagine as a teenager you decide you're interested in something a bit strange. You deal with that, make comments. 20 years later, you're looking at getting a job and somebody can pull this up and it goes against you.
Even if you delete it. Yeah, so for example, I put something on Facebook, I think, perhaps I shouldn't have put that up there, so I delete it. How can that be rediscovered?
Because I'm sure you're aware, you can delete a file off a hard drive, but it's still there. You just lose the address of that file. And if you've got something online, if it's there longer than a couple of seconds, it's there. You will never trace that. It's copied, it's put all over the place, and you cannot eliminate anything at all.
So even if you've got some sort of software that you can use to delete something from your computer hard drive, what you're saying is once it's gone into the World Wide Web, it cannot then be deleted. Is that right?
That's right. You have no control over that information. Once it's gone onto the World Wide Web, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to thousands and thousands of different servers, computers. You will never retrieve it. Well, remove it, I should say. You can retrieve it, as will many other people, but you can't remove it.
Okay, so those of us who have computers, and I've often sort of read that you should be frightened of the fact that your camera in your computer or in your laptop or even on your mobile phone or on your iPad or tablet could actually be watching you, and of course the speaker system and sound system or microphone system could actually be listening into you. Now, are those sorts of concerns well-founded, and how can they be accessed if you haven't actually given someone access to it?
Well, I think there's two issues here, Richard. To answer the question, yes, it can be done, and very easily. But the bigger and more important issue that people forget, 99.9% of people on the planet are as safe as houses, because nobody's interested. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to, listen to what you're talking about in your room or film you whilst you're working on your computer. Nobody cares. There's nothing to be gained. However, if you are potentially at risk because you're a celebrity perhaps, or you work in a business where there's confidential information that could be gleaned from listening to you or watching you, then you should be worried. But other than that, most people are as safe as houses, not because they've got security stopping it, but because nobody's interested. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like a house. If you've got something of value, you're at risk of being burgled. If there's nothing in the house, very unlikely to be burgled. And the internet's very much the same.
So, I take that, but I'm walking around with my iPad. Mm-hmm. How can someone access my camera or my microphone?
Well, I'm obviously not going to tell you how to do it, but it isn't difficult.
Right.
It really isn't difficult. The safest thing you do, if you disable your camera mm-hmm. and microphone, mm-hmm. then and check regularly, you're fairly safe. But to be honest, if somebody wants to activate those and they're close enough to you for a short period of time, they will, and they will know everything they need to know in seconds.
So what you're saying is they have to be in relative close proximity, unless, does that equally apply on your mainstream computer if it's linked to the internet, or can someone from miles away access your computer?
If you're online, mm-hmm. you can be sat in this country, mm-hmm. and they can be sat in Russia or China mm-hmm. and access your computer if they want to. It might take them a while, but they can do it. If you're not online, it's harder, but not impossible. Because if you're connected to a network, all anybody would have to do is get into your network and then access your computer that way.
So what sort of protections could someone like me, who perhaps is not a celebrity certainly, but I have been involved in the past in politics and certainly in banking at a senior level, so I may have had, perhaps not now because I'm broadly retired, but may have had access to information that others may wish to glean or obtain. What could I do to protect myself as much as possible?
Again, I think it's quite difficult. The easiest way, if you've got any information that you are worried about, then keep it on a separate computer and not connected to a network. Mm-hmm. That's the easiest way, because if it's not in any way connected to anything, other than actually physically stealing it, nobody can access that information. If you've only got one computer and you've got stuff, then encrypt the files that are precious to you, and the more the encryption, the less likely it is for someone to access. But let me make this clear. If you're a target of a professional, then there's very little you can do. It'll take them longer, and if you're lucky, you'll spot that and you can do something about it. But if a professional wants to get into your computer, then into your computer they'll go. There is no way of stopping them.
So what about taking the camera into account? I know people who put a tape over their camera lens and then basically that stops someone viewing you at least. That works, doesn't it?
Well, yes, obviously it works. But again, it's just as easy to disable it and check. Because if you disable something, if you check every day, every time you log on, just check, is the camera enabled? If it is, disable it. If it re-enables again, then you know there's somebody digging around. So you have to be aware, as you would with everything else. You know, if you've got a window that's partially open in your home, and you left it shut, then somebody tried to get in. It's common sense, and a lot of people don't actually understand that.
Now, what about these devices many people have in their homes? Now, depending which country you're in, they're called something slightly different, or they have variants of it. But you have devices such as Alexa, where you can walk into your house and say, Alexa, play me X music, and so on. Or Alexa, who was king in 19 or 1876, or well, it would have been Queen in 1876, certainly as far as the UK is concerned. So, what protection do you have there? Can those devices listening on you? Can someone actually manage to infiltrate that so they can hear you in your home? And then I want to go on to other devices which are internet connected, such as, for example, there were rumours that within your refrigerator or within a microwave there are secret microphones or something of that ilk. Share us your knowledge on that.
Well, let's address the Alexa situation. I have several Alexas, but there have been examples where people at some stage have told Alexa to listen to them, or use Alexa to phone people or email people. Now, there have been several well-recorded cases where Alexa has listened to a conversation, say you and I are having a conversation now about a mutual friend, and Alexa does its thing and emails that mutual friend that conversation. And this has happened. So we've been slating this fictitious person. Alexa thinks, I'll tell you what, I'll email this fictitious person with a breakdown of the conversation. And it's happened. It does happen. And again, common sense. I've not enabled our Alexas to phone people, email people, or to listen and record stuff. That is basically the best thing. But obviously, just remember it's there.
So, for example, then, if I'm not internet savvy in any way, and I just buy my Alexa from Amazon or wherever, I just plug it in, will that automatically link then to the internet and so on, or to my email, or must I specifically authorize and program it to do that?
You have to tell it.
You have to
give it your email details.
Right.
And it doesn't stop it listening to you, but if it hasn't got access to email addresses, so your address book, if it hasn't got access to telephone numbers, there's very little it can do with it. But it is connected to the internet. So yet again, in theory, somebody could get into your home network and do whatever they felt like doing with Alexa. But unless they had your information on email accounts, for example, nothing could happen.
But they could listen in to you, though.
But they could, yeah. I'm not aware that it happens often.
No.
But potentially it could happen.
What about things like your microwave or your fridge freezer and all these sorts of rumours?
Again, I think there's an awful lot of... I'm not quite sure the way to phrase this. People think that everything's monitoring them. The reality of it is very rare because of the legal consequences. So it would have to be, a company would... If you remember, there was a case some years ago about I forget which company it was, one of the television manufacturers had put cameras in their televisions to monitor what people did when they were watching television. And the consequences of that were horrific. So it can be done, but is it worth it? What would somebody gain by listening to you or I making a coffee?
Yes.
Or making a sandwich? Very little. And this is expensive technology. The quickest way to spot if something's happening that you don't know about, if you've got a home router, well, if you're not doing anything, and that router's flashing away like a madman, you have to say, what's that doing? So you log on to your router, see what's generating the traffic, and interrogate back down through the system. And if you suddenly find that your fridge, for example, if it's internet enabled, is doing a hell of a lot of chatting to somebody, you've got a problem.
Right.
But I suspect that not many fridges do that these days.
No, indeed not. And generally speaking, looking forward, obviously we have the onset of artificial intelligence, more sophisticated machinery is being introduced. People are linking almost every device now to Wi-Fi or to some form of internet-enabled facility. Is Big Brother watching us? Are we now really all, unless we go off the grid completely, all going to be victims of perhaps a dystopian state? What's your general consensus, or is the state not that interested?
I would have to say, in most cases, the state probably isn't interested. The reality of it is, we've had a lot of fuss in this country these days about introducing an ID card and facial recognition. We all carry a mobile phone. They could pinpoint our exact position to within a couple of feet anytime they want. There is no privacy anymore. It's how you deal with that. It's in the case of your phone, we all use them. But if you ever do anything you don't want anybody to know about, then leave your phone at home. It's that simple, but the technology is there. They can follow us wherever we want, and do in some cases. AI, there was a fascinating experiment done about 3 or 4 years ago, possibly longer, where they had an AI phone people up and have a conversation. I think in this one example I'm thinking of, pretending to be a hairdresser.
Right.
And people didn't know. They thought they were talking to a human being. And the AI had a conversation with them, and nobody knew that they were talking to a computer. They thought they were talking to a human. And if you look, there's plenty of info on the internet where they can generate people. And they'll say, is this person artificial? Is this person real? Well, they're invariably artificial. You would not know. So when you're talking to that pretty lady online sometime, you might find you're actually talking to a computer. Now that's scary, but is there any ulterior motive to that? At the moment, I suspect not. Could it be exploited? Obviously.
Yes. So what you're suggesting, for example, if I wanted to earn a quick buck, I'll set up an online dating site, and all the ladies or all the men on that site really are all AIs, and other people are then signing up and being chatted up by, whether it's a woman or a man, and it's all a fraud.
Yeah, you're chatting up a server. And that might interest some people in the IT world, but the majority of us think, well, that was a bit of a waste of time. But it is, the technology's there and has been some time. You
do realise I've now given our listeners an idea on how to make some money.
Well, I'm sure it happens, Richard. I'm absolutely positive somebody somewhere is doing it.
Wow, that is scary. And of course, moving forward, I did pick up on a sort of forum where they suggested that the technology is now such and will be introduced where they will take a picture of you and they'll create an AI version of you and get you to say whatever they like, and it's almost completely indiscernible from the real thing.
Yeah.
Which then means if you want to frame someone, whether it be a politician or a celebrity or anyone for that matter, as long as you've got the technology and the software to do it, you can do so. And how that person's going to prove they didn't say that, or they didn't commit whatever act you've programmed that AI to commit, how they prove it's not them, I've no idea.
It's almost impossible. And that's obviously you were in a room full of people.
At the time.
But the technology's there. You've got to remember, everything we see, what average people see online as you can do this. The reality is the technology is that much further advanced. It's been doing that for a long time.
Wow.
And that's when it becomes scary. But the underlying truth always is, most people will never be affected by any of that. I think people worry more. They don't need to.
Ray, fascinating. I could go on for hours, but we won't. We'd like to keep our videos within 20 minutes if we can. Any last words of advice to our listeners?
I think the best thing that most people can do if you ever read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is don't panic. There's no need to panic. And rest assured, whatever you do to stop it, there's somebody cleverer to get past anything you do to protect yourself. So don't worry about it. They're not interested.
Unless you're famous, of
Unless
course.
you're famous, in which case you need to worry.
Ray, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Richard.
We hope you have found this video interesting and informative. And if so, please give it a thumbs up and share it on social media. Please ensure that you have subscribed to our channel and press the bell sign so that you are notified of any future videos. Also, kindly visit our website at illuminatisilver.com, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe either as a free or paying member for regular email updates and offers. Disclaimer. Illuminati Silver owners come from a background of banking, international wealth management and economics. Having now retired from these worlds, we are not qualified to give investment advice. Therefore, this and other productions must not be deemed to be giving such advice and merely represent the personal views of its owners.